Hello and welcome to Tête-à-Tête, France 24's flagship interview show. Our guest today is John Bolton. He served as National Security Advisor under Donald Trump, and he joins us from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Mr. Bolton, for being with us.
Glad to be with you.
Donald Trump is going to become president once again on January the 20th, and we now have a ceasefire agreement in Gaza. And it's interesting because you have this kind of unusual cooperation between the outgoing Biden administration and the incoming Trump team. And Donald Trump, on his social media, said, quote, "This epic ceasefire agreement could only have happened as a result of our historic victory in November." What do you think of that claim by Donald Trump?
Well, I don't think the deal itself is a very good deal. It looks a lot like what the Biden administration had been pushing for about the last 7 months, and I didn't think it was good then. I don't think it gets any better because Trump endorsed it. In fact, it's kind of ironic that Trump is taking credit for putting Biden's deal over the line. I do think he's right, however, in saying that it wouldn't have happened without him. My impression is that Trump sent his friend and now special negotiator Steve Witkoff to Jerusalem and basically told Netanyahu, "You agree to this or else." Trump's coming in on the 20th of January and he wants this deal. So if you're the prime minister of Israel and the president that you hope and expect is going to be favorable toward your position tells you this is the price, sort of like the protection racket, they're going to agree to it. Now, whether, in fact, the deal goes through, we'll see. But I think it's a typical Trump do it my way or else kind of approach that caused this to happen.
Right. Obviously, you resigned from the White House back in 2019. You've since become a critic, staunch critic of Donald Trump. What do you make of his declarations prior to entering to the White House, especially when it comes to Panama, Canada, and Greenland? I believe that when you were in the White House, there was already talk about U.S. interest in Greenland, and that you were even tasked with exploring this with the Danish government at the time. Can you tell us what happened at the time?
Right. Well, as with most Trump things, it's the air is filled with rhetoric. Sometimes he means it, sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he understands it, sometimes he doesn't. The fact is, the U.S. has had significant interest in Greenland for a long time in security terms that have grown more acute as China, for example, strives to become an Arctic power, and so control of the Arctic Ocean, control of the approaches to the North Atlantic are extremely important, and so are the mineral resources that Greenland is apparently rich with. Right now, there are 4 NATO countries with territory and claims around the Arctic: the U.S., Canada, Denmark, and Norway, and the rest of it's Russian. So if a hole appears in that what is currently a NATO front, that's very serious, I think, for the whole alliance. And back in 2019, when this idea came up, we did a lot of research just to show how far back this goes. Your viewers may know that in World War II, Franklin Roosevelt put American Marines and Coast Guard on Greenland before Pearl Harbor, after the Danish government fell to the Germans. And after Pearl Harbor, we basically occupied Greenland. Many of the runways used in the small airports in Greenland were built by the United States during World War II. So this interest goes back a long way. The question is, what's the best way to secure Greenland for the good of the United States, Canada, and the whole NATO alliance? And obviously, the best way to do that would be in a quiet negotiation with the government of Denmark and the local government of Greenland, not to do it in public view the way Trump does it.
Right, and this is what you did back in 2019 until it became public and it didn't work out.
Right. The then prime minister of Denmark, who's still prime minister today, said it would be absurd for Greenland to be sold to the United States by Denmark, whereupon Donald Trump called the prime minister a nasty person. Not the way to win friends and influence people, as we say. This is obviously very sensitive. It's very sensitive for the United States, too. And there are a lot of ways in which sovereignty can be parceled out. I would not be opposed to having U.S. sovereign over Greenland as a commonwealth like Puerto Rico. The Greenlanders don't want that. There are plenty of other ways to do it. We've got a treaty with Denmark now from 1951 called the Defense of Greenland Treaty. There are a lot of possibilities and a lot of things that can be done to benefit the inhabitants of Greenland and protect them from Chinese and Russian intrusion.
How do you think Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping are interpreting Donald Trump's views on Panama, Greenland, also not ruling out the use of military force? I mean, how do they read this in the Kremlin and in Beijing?
Well, they're celebrating Trump's remarks. When Trump says he refuses to use out the rule of force, Xi Jinping in Beijing could say, well, we consider Taiwan central to our national security as well. I'm not going to rule out the use of force to take Taiwan. That's something we've expressly told Beijing we think is wrong, and yet they can simply refer to Donald Trump's remarks. Putin could say the same thing. He could say Ukraine's critical to our security, and not only have we not ruled out the use of force, we're using it. So if Donald Trump invades Greenland, we have no problem with that. Trump, as usual, doesn't think of the second order effects of what he says, but it provides aid to our adversaries and I think discourages our allies. Same is true in Panama. The week before Trump made his comments about the Panama Canal, the president of Panama, speaking about illegal immigration, said that America's border is really the Darien Gap in Panama, where North America joins South America. The Panamanians don't like illegal immigrants from South America walking through Panama on their way to the Rio Grande. And so there was a possibility to work with Panama to solve the mutual problem of illegal immigration. Who knows where that stands after Trump's implicit threat to use force, which is why when people try to explain Trump by saying, well, he just, he talks a lot and he takes maximalist positions, simply that kind of approach can cause damage. It's Trump getting in his own way. He just doesn't see it.
Right. He also promised during the campaign to solve the Ukraine-Russia war in 24 hours. Now he's amended that position and said it would take some 6 months. What do you think he's going to tell Vladimir Putin to make that happen? Or do you think this is a pie in the sky?
Well, I think it's at least significant that he recognized it's more complicated than he said during the campaign. But his advisors have talked about a number of different possibilities of how to approach the negotiations. I don't think there's any final decision, but my general impression is that Trump wants the Ukraine war off the table, wants the war in the Middle East off the table too. He doesn't want it interfering with his new administration. And the implication is he doesn't care how the wars end so long as he doesn't have to worry about them. And I think that's very bad news for Ukraine. I'm really quite worried about the direction that Trump will take.
Meaning you think he'll agree to a partition of Ukraine?
Well, J.D. Vance, the incoming vice president, said during the campaign that he thought the solution was a ceasefire in place in Ukraine, creating a demilitarized zone, and then committing that Ukraine would not join NATO. I mean, that's an outcome you could have written in the Kremlin. And if that reflects not just J.D. Vance, but reflects Trump's thinking, it's very bad news for the Ukrainians.
Right. You mentioned J.D. Vance, the vice president. What do you think of some of the picks to become Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, or the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard? They've held positions that are very much opposed to any kind of U.S. intervention abroad. What do you make of those kinds of appointments? Are you concerned by them, or do you think that since they're more in sync maybe with Trump than during his first administration, it will work better in the White House and elsewhere in government?
Well, Trump's nominees are vary widely in the quality and experience they bring to these positions, and they have different philosophies. But of all of them, there are three I consider dangerous to the country. One was Matt Gaetz, who was nominated to be Attorney General. He at least is out of the picture. Tulsi Gabbard, I do think is dangerous as the potential director of national intelligence. I think many of our allies would consider her so ill-equipped for the job that they would hesitate to share intelligence with us. And the third is Kash Patel, who's been nominated to be the director of the FBI, which has both a law enforcement and an intelligence role. And if Trump carries out a retribution campaign, as he has threatened to do, Kash Patel would just do his bidding for him. So I think those three nominations really carry serious potential damage for the country.
What is your biggest worry for a second Trump mandate? China, maybe a war between the US and another country? Or do you think that eventually Trump will have learned the ropes and be better prepared to be a better president than the first time around?
I think the second term will look a lot like the first term. Disorganized, non-strategic, reactive, transactional, not guided by any national strategy or even policy. That's just not the way Trump operates. I think the issue that's not receiving as much attention as it should, given that we've got war in Ukraine, given the Middle East, given the threat of China against Taiwan and in the South China Sea, the issue that's not receiving enough attention internationally is the question of tariffs. Now, again, we don't know exactly what Trump is aiming to do. He's said all different manner of things. He has not put his program down on a piece of paper yet. But the expectation is he does hope to raise significant revenues from higher tariffs. And every indication is European Union, China, Canada, Mexico, which are our two biggest trading partners, will retaliate. And it's been a long time since the world has had a full-fledged trade war, which may be easier to get into than it is to get out of. So the potential economic consequences here, I think, are should be a lot more concerning to people than they seem to be.
John Bolton, thank you very much for being our guest here on Tête à Tête, and thank you all for watching this edition on France 24.